Hi, I'm Ed Hall, and we're coming to you today from Bikeworks in Harleysville, Pennsylvania to talk about how to change flat tires on bicycles when you're on the road. The flat tire is the most common mechanical problem on a bicycle. We're going to show you today how to fix a flat on the rear wheel, which is, believe it or not, very easy to do. So if you can remember these tips, when you do go to change your flat, it will make your life a lot better. First thing you're going to need to carry with you at all times are a few items. You're going to need a bag or something to carry your parts in. In that bag, you're going to need an inner tube. I always recommend keeping the inner tube in the box because that way you protect the tube from when you put things in and out of your bag, such as your keys or your cell phone. This way, when you pull your tube out, it won't have any holes in it. You're going to need some tire levers. They generally come in a set of 2 or 3, and these you're going to need to pry your tire off the rim. And you're also going to need some sort of a pump, whether it be a CO2 pump, which we'll show you how to use today, or a traditional mini pump to carry on the bike. Tip number 2 is shift your chain all the way down into your smallest gear. And the reason you want to do that is that it's going to make it very easy for the wheel to come off. Now that our chain's in the smallest gear, we're going to undo our quick release on our brake, undo our quick release on our wheel, and the wheel will come right off of the bike. As you can see there, not only do I have the wheel out, but I have no dirt on my hands. So we're going to lay our bike down, chain side up, that way we'll keep the dirt and grit out of the chain. There are 2 sides to the tire lever. There is a scoop side and a hooked side. When you go to use your tire levers, tip number 3 is to start directly opposite of your valve when you are taking your tire off. Tip number 1 was leave your tube in the box. Tip number 2, shift into the smallest gear. Tip number 3, start opposite of your valve. You're going to pull your tire back to expose the bead of the tire, that's the edge of the tire. We're going to hook the tire lever on there with the hooked end or scooped end, and the hooked end will go right onto the spoke, allowing you to work hands-free with your next tool. Now you're just basically going to do the same process, except you're just going to pry a little bit of the tire off. Generally, once you get a few inches away from your first tire lever, you can just stick your second tire lever in and just push along and remove your tire. At this point, what I recommend is leaving the tire on the rim. Just take 1/2 off and remove your inner tube. The reason I recommend leaving the tire on the rim is because what we're going to do now is pump up our flat inner tube and find our hole. So we're going to take our tube and put it on our pump, put it on our tube, and we're going to pump away, putting air in it, and we're going to look for our hole in our inner tube. Okay? In this part of the country, we generally only have 2 types of flats in most cases. There are punctures or there are pinch flats. Punctures are caused by a piece of glass or stone going into the tube through the tire. Okay? A pinch flat is caused by hitting a pothole or a rock or a railroad track, and you actually pinch the inner tube between the ground and the rim. So, pinch flats are always categorized by what looks like a snake bite, 2 holes next to each other with white powder burns on them. Punctures are going to look just like what they are, a very small pinhole where air is coming out of. So when you pump your tire up and you find your flat problem, which in this case is very easy, it's a stone directly embedded in the tube, we can take that out. Okay, so we found that stone in the tube. But now that we found that stone in the tube, we look at where the valve is, and we go, ooh, that stone's directly opposite of the valve. Okay, so now I can go to my tire, and my valve was right here, and I can go directly opposite of it and concentrate my search in the tire for my problem. So now we're going to take our new tube out of the box. Your tube will come like this. You're going to remove the jam nut and the valve cap. On a Presta valve, you'll have to open it up. If you have a traditional Schrader valve, you'll just remove. You're going to take your pump and you're going to put a little bit of air into your tube before you put it on. This is tip number 4. Put a little bit of air in your inner tube because it gives it shape. And here is where people get most frustrated. When they're putting their inner tube in their tire, they get very frustrated because they don't put air in their tube, they don't give it shape. It makes it much more difficult to put the tube in. So, we're going to put the tire back on, put the tube back on. We will pull the tire back, exposing the valve hole. You'll slide your valve in, and since we gave our tube shape, we're going to pull the tire over, we can literally just set it in. Look, I'm almost done. So we just take that tube, set it in the tire. Because it has shape, it goes in very easily, very simply. Okay? That's a great tip. Now, tip number 5 is to start putting the tire on at the valve. Tip number 1, leave your tube in your box. Tip number 2, shift into the smallest chain. Tip number 3, start taking the tire off at the valve. Tip number 4, pump your tube up a little bit before you put it in. Tip number 5, start putting your tire up on back at the valve. The valve is the thickest part of the tube, so it's the most difficult to get seated. Put your tire on, push the tube up in a little bit, and then just work your way around. I always work my tires when I'm putting them on just like I'm doing here, where I lean it against my knees and work my way around with both hands. Once I get to the point where it's 3/4 of the way on, I'll generally lift it up and set it on my lap. And that allows me to push my inner tube in, and then I can just work my way around with the tire. In most cases, you can just push the tire on with your thumbs, but not in every case. So that's what tire levers are great for, is when you get it to this point where it's halfway on, almost all the way on, you can just take your tire lever, turn it around upside down, and pry it on. Boom. There we go. Tip number 6. Put a little bit of air in your tube. Do not pump it up all the way at this point. You want to give it maybe 15-20 pounds of air. You'll also notice how I am holding my pump and the tire at the same time, okay? You see that? Everything's in my hand. If I were to just hold it like this and pump away, I risk tearing the tube valve off. So by holding it like this, I'm protecting the tube and holding the pump in place, okay? Once you get a little bit of air in, you're going to remove your pump and you're going to check to make sure that your tire is seated evenly all the way around the rim. You're going to look for any high spots or low spots. If you have them at this point, because they're not totally filled up, you can manipulate the tire a little bit to make sure that everything is centered. And if it is, you then just go ahead and pump it up to full capacity. So we've showed you how to use a hand pump. What we're going to show you now is how to use a CO2. What we're using today is Bontrager's Air Rush pump. It's a fantastic little pump. You make sure that your threaded end is threaded all the way in. You thread your CO2 cartridge, which is compressed CO2 gas, all the way in. You then take your pump, push it onto your valve, and you just open up your screw on the other side, and that has pumped that tire up all the way. We're done. Everything's ready to go. So we just remove that from the pump. You'll take notice as to how I removed the cartridge from the pump. My thumb's on the edge of the pump and I pushed straight down. Do not wiggle or twist, you will damage your valve. From here you just close your valve up, you put your jam nuts and valve caps back on, and we're ready to put the tire back onto the bike. we'll take our bike, we'll hold the bike by the seat. That way I can manipulate and move the bike exactly as I want to. Put the tire, put the wheel back in, set that chain on the smallest cog. Since I put my chain into the smallest cog when I took it off, I can just set it on there, pull the derailleur back just a tiny bit, and it will pop right in. Look, my hands are clean. No grease, no fuss, no muss. So that number 2 tip is your best friend. Shift into the smallest gear. Make sure you push weight down on the saddle to center the wheel. You then tighten your quick release up, readjust your brake quick release, make sure your tire's spinning, and enjoy the rest of your ride. Thanks for being here at Bikeworks today and letting us show you how to change that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a call or drop us an email here at Bikeworks. We're here to help.